I mean, listen, we're at war right now. We're at war abroad, we're at war at home, and there are extraordinary things that you do at war. In fact, it's in several different laws, including the Patriot Act, which last year was renewed 89-10 in the Senate. So, you know, I consider the phone companies to be patriots at this point.
Well, Peter, it sounds like some private businesses have been very proactive in helping out the government. Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, look, I think that the Constitution and individual privacy is more important than the government's need to gather intelligence. You know, I mean, you had Ron Paul on here earlier. He's one of the few people that talked against the Patriot Act. I mean, that was a terrible bill to have passed. I mean, we as Americans, unfortunately, we suffer much greater threats to our liberties from our own government than from foreign terrorists.
But, Peter,
sure,
these companies were just following what they were asked to do by the president. I mean, at what point are they at fault here? Because they're being put on the spot.
If they have specific reason to believe a specific conversation, they can go to a judge and get a warrant. To just go on a fishing expedition and say, I want all the information from all the telephone calls that you have, and we don't know what the government's going to do with that information. There's nothing that says that they can only use it for terrorists. You know, you don't want the government to be gathering all kinds of information on its citizens that it can use against us.
You say if they have specific threats, how do you get specific threats unless you can see a certain pattern? I mean, I don't understand it. So they're going to just guess at specific threats? Look at the headlines, Peter. You're not paying attention.
Yes, sure I am.
You have the greatest liberties in the world. You can go nowhere else I can think of and put down a country and a government and the people the way that you do on a weekly basis. Look, you and the Bill Maher's of the world, you want your freedoms and you have them, but you don't understand what it takes to keep them.
Look, Charles, you don't have to keep attacking my patriotism because I disagree with you on what's going to happen to the stock market or the dollar.
Because Charles, I want to stick with this topic about the fact of the matter is, listen, what do you think we should do to protect ourselves?
Look,
or
I think
we just counterpunch?
Right. We should protect. Question. Go ahead, Peter.
We should protect our constitutional liberties, our rights to privacy, and try to fight the war on terror. But we can't sacrifice the Constitution in order to do it. Otherwise, what are we fighting for?
We're not sacrificing the Constitution. The government was looking at phone bills for records and trends. Who's calling the Middle East? Who may be calling the hills in Pakistan? You know, we're looking for specific things to head off disaster.
Yeah, and
I can't see why
you don't know
that is
how
such
the government is going to.
Well, you know what? That's the way they told me they're doing it, and I want to believe them. I'm not like you. I don't distrust everything the government does.
Well, this country was founded by people who distrusted government. That's why we have a Constitution.
They distrusted a bad government with the king and unfair taxes.
They distrusted this government. They said it was a necessary evil. The Constitution is written
we brought
to protect...
into this. We created this Congress. You know, this is fifth grade social studies. We know how this country was created, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect. You can't have liberties if your people are lying in the street dead because we couldn't stop a suicide bomber who was making phone calls to his buddies every day.
Charles, most of our liberties have been lost during wartime. The greatest amount of threats to our personal liberties have come to with what governments have done. You know,
Peter, I don't know if anybody's talking about how bad things are anyway in Detroit. I mean, we're talking about, is this the death knell for Detroit? Detroit has had some real problems over the past decade.
They have a lot of problems right now. I mean, certainly they're on their back. I mean, the last thing they need is the government to be kicking them. But, you know, they've loaned a lot of money to people to buy their cars. They're not going to get paid back. They have huge unfunded liabilities for pension and health insurance. They're having a lot of problems. But I think fundamentally, you know, the federal government has no constitutional authority to be legislating fuel standards in the first place. These decisions should be left to the free market. If consumers want fuel-efficient cars, then the producers will supply them. I mean, it's not up to the government to be telling me, you know, what kind of mileage my car needs to get. It's up to me to decide.
Look, Congress legislates. I mean, if you're saying the government has no constitutional authority, that's what Congress does.
But they have to
why don't we say then that Congress has no constitutional authority to apply tariffs, to apply other means of, legislation, other sorts of legislation?
Mike,
you can't. That's a crazy statement. I don't know what you're trying to say.
Just because they have the authority to do one thing doesn't mean they have the authority to do everything. The Constitution limits the ability of the government to legislate. They can't just legislate on whatever they want. No, unfortunately, today the government ignores the Constitution. They do whatever they want.
But wait a minute. Peter, let's just be specific. What are they doing that ignores the Constitution?
Right. Well, there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the federal government the authority to pass these types of legislation. They can't legislate fuel standards. I mean,
hold on a second. You started by saying they're unconstitutional, and then you said there's nothing in the Constitution that allows them to do this. Those are two different things.
No, that's how the Constitution works. It grants powers to the federal government.
No, but there's nothing in the Constitution about cafe standards standards because we didn't have cars in 1790s.
It doesn't matter if we didn't have cars. They couldn't pass those kind of legislations for horse and buggies. They couldn't come back and have how many what your horse needs to be like.
Hold on, Jim Petticoat.
It's okay to view it as an intrusion. That is a matter of opinion. But to say that Congress does not have a constitutional right to do this is absurd. The Congress created the FTC. The Congress created the Interstate Commerce Commission.
Too. That is not
unconstitutional.
It is unconstitutional.
Peter Schiff, your take?
Well, I completely disagree. I mean, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs in this economy. That's inevitable right now. But the problem is if we prop up companies like General Motors and Chrysler, we're going to prevent people from getting viable jobs in the future. But I think a bigger problem is the legality of all this. What really bothers me is not the bad economics, but nobody is questioning the congressional authority. You know, where in the Constitution does it say that Congress can bail out private companies, guarantee the debt of private companies, buy stock in private companies, loan money to private companies? And now, not only has the Senate done the right thing in rejecting it, but now we have Henry Paulson, who's going to take the TARP money that he got under false pretense, and now he's going to override Congress, and he's going to bail these companies out anyway. I mean, imagine how you'd feel if you're a senator and you actually got conned into voting for the TARP, but you voted against the bailout, and now you're having that TARP money used to bail out the companies that you had the good sense to let go under.
Is this the end of capitalism as we know it, Peter?
Well, capitalism has been gone for a long time, but I think this is another nail in the coffin for sure. You know, with all due respect to Wayne, what we're about to go through is nothing like the 1970s. It's going to be so much worse.
He was kind of agreeing with you, though.
But apart from this deal, apart from flushing $85 billion taxpayer dollars down the toilet, which is what the government has done, and of course this is just the beginning. It's going to be a lot more. They shredded more of the Constitution. The Federal Reserve has no authority to do this. They can't nationalize companies. When you have an agency that can print money, you can't let it print that money and go buy up businesses. If they can buy up sick companies, which is what they're doing now, they can buy up healthy companies. They can buy anything they want. We are giving too much power to the government. The government abuses power. It corrupts. It's corrupting absolutely. All these problems we're having now are the result of government interference in the market. We've got to get back to freedom.